As we talked about in the last video, log ingestion is a process of collecting, parsing, and forwarding log data from various sources such as operating systems, network devices, security tools, and cloud services into a centralized platform for monitoring and analysis. In the context of security operations, effective log ingestion is essential for visibility, detection, and response. This lab will explore ingesting endpoint logs into Splunk. By the end of the lab, you'll understand how log ingestion supports real-time monitoring, threat hunting, and incident investigation within a modern security operations center. Okay, for this lab, we have both virtual machines running. Now, we're really not going to do anything with the CySA Plus Labs virtual machine. We're not going to interact with it directly, at least from the console. So I'm going to minimize that. And what I'm going to do is to log into Splunk. So I just open a browser that's on my host system, and we're going to go to the IP address of our Splunk server, which is that CySA Plus Labs virtual machine. And I typed in the address, the IP address, and port 8000, and it brings me to the logon screen. So remember, for Splunk, the login is admin, and then the password is password with a capital P and the number 1. So now you see I'm in it. So the first thing I want to do, because we're going to create some indexes in Splunk so that we can forward some Windows logs, both the Win event logs and Sysmon logs. So what we need to do is to create indexes in Splunk for those logs. So if we go to settings and then we go to indexes, and you can see right now there's no index for Win event or for Sysmon. So what we're going to do is just click on the new index in the upper right, and we'll call this Win event log instead of just Win event. Let's select OK. Another index, and you notice I'm not making any changes to anything else, just adding the name to the index, and this one will be called Sysmon. And then I'll select Save. So now you see we have both Sysmon and Win event indexes. Of course, we don't have anything in those indexes yet, but that's what we'll be creating right now. So the next thing we want to do is to make sure that the Sysmon add-on and the Windows add-on are installed on our Splunk server. So we'll go to Apps at the drop-down in the upper left, and we'll go to Find More Apps. And then we're just going to simply type Sysmon. And we see the Splunk add-on for Sysmon. It says it's already installed, so we don't have to do anything there. If it was not already installed, we'd go ahead and select Install. Now we'll look for the Windows add-on, and we see it is already installed also, so we don't have to do anything on the apps. So now we'll go to our Windows VM, and this would be the Windows 11 virtual machine. And what we want to do now is to download the Splunk forwarder. There's a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to open PowerShell, and what I'm going to do is run a wget command that is going to go out to the Splunk webpage and download the forwarder for me automatically. What this helps you do is you do not have to log in with your account in Splunk. And if you don't have a commercial email account, it's difficult to get a account in Splunk, and it makes it difficult to download stuff. So this is a workaround. Another workaround besides going to the web page itself is there is a link in the walkthrough to a repository that you can download it that I host myself. Now what I will do is go ahead and change the directory to the desktop. So it's users, and since student is the name of it, the account that we're using in the desktop, auto completion works. I'm just going to run this from here because where you run it from when you run wget is where the file will end up. So once I just copied this wget command from the walkthrough, and now we're ready to run it. And you should see this blue. What this is doing, that's actually showing that PowerShell is reaching out to the internet at the URL provided, and it's pulling down the Splunk forwarder, which is a .msi file. So basically what a .msi file is, it's an installer file for Windows. It will do everything for you. All you need to do is double click it. So it's similar to, it is an executable, similar to an exe file, but this is used to install different Windows applications. Now this may take a little bit depending on your internet speed. I'll pause the video. It's a good time for a break. Okay, so now it is completely downloaded, and what we're going to do is, before we do anything else, we have the forwarder downloaded. What we want to do is make sure that we have connectivity to our Splunk server. So in the walkthrough, there is this command, and basically it's just testing the network connection to that IP address, to that port 9997. And that is important because that is the port that logs are forwarded to with Splunk. And you see that test succeeded, it's true. So we do have connectivity from our Windows VM, which is the .67 to our Splunk server, which is .39 over port 9997. So now we're ready to install the Splunk forwarder. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to double click it as if we're going to do a regular install, and we will accept the license agreement, and we'll click next. And make sure that you pick on-premise Splunk Enterprise instance, and then we'll click next. For username, let's keep this consistent across Splunk. So remember, the username for Splunk is admin, and then I'm going to create my own password to make it simple throughout this course. The password I'm using is password1 with a capital P and then the number 1. Then I'll click next. So now it's asking for some information, and what we're going to do is not provide this information now because we're going to run a PowerShell script that will configure our Splunk forwarder for us. So we can just click next, and it tells us we have not specified a deployment server. That's fine. Go ahead and select OK. Now it's ready to install the forwarder. It's just not going to be configured yet, and that's what we will do with our PowerShell script. So go ahead and select next, and we want to install the Splunk forwarder. As the Splunk forwarder is being installed, let's go ahead and open up Notepad. All right, and as the forwarder came up, let's just click Finish. Now we have Notepad open. And the reason we have Notepad open is I want to grab that code that's in the walkthrough on step 6, and I'm just going to paste it into Notepad. And then I'm going to save this as a PowerShell script, and I'll go over what this script is actually doing. So just File, Save As, and I'm going to make it really simple. I'm just going to name it UF for Universal Forwarder or Splunk Forwarder, and then make sure you put the file extension .ps1 so that it is a PowerShell script, and we're going to keep it on the desktop. So we'll go ahead and select Save. And now to demonstrate exactly what this command is doing, the easiest way to do this is the explanation of the code is in the walkthrough. So I'll just pull it over from the I'll just pull the walkthrough over to the screen. And it's broken this entire script down to certain sections. And the first section defines some variables, including the indexer IP address. So the indexer IP address is the same as the Splunk server, and that is the .39. And then the port that we want to go to is port 997, and it shows where the universal forwarder is located with the path. And there's more explanations there. As we go through, then it creates a configuration directory. And then it configures the output to the indexer. So basically, once again, how it's sending these logs that are from this Windows virtual machine to our Splunk indexer and our Splunk server. And from the inputs, this is the logs that we're actually going to grab. So first is the application logs, and that will go into the index when event logs, and then the security logs and the system logs. The one that's a little bit different is the Sysmon logs. Now remember, while Sysmon is a Microsoft product, it does not come included in Windows by default, so that's why we had to install Sysmon in our lab setup. And the logging is a little bit different. As you can see, the path to the Sysmon logs, and you notice we're typing source type on this particular log because we want XML when event log, and the rest of the source types we're not using for the application security and system because by default those will be when event logs. There's a little bit more of a explanation there, and then at the end what that script is going to do is actually restart both the universal forwarder and start the behavior as far as the Splunk will start to work. So in summary, the script performs the full initial configuration of the universal forwarder and enables it to send logs to Splunk. It monitors the window logs, including Sysmon, and then it's going to ensure that the Splunk service, this forwarder, is going to start every time that the computer starts. Okay, so now we have the PowerShell script on our saved to Notepad on our desktop. We can go ahead and close. We don't need it to be open because we're just going to use PowerShell to run that script. Okay, since this is the first time that we've ran a PowerShell script on this system, by default, and will show the execution policy is restricted. We're just going to run get execution policy, and you see it currently is restricted. So we want to change this to unrestricted, and what that does is it allows us the ability to run PowerShell scripts. So for security purposes, by default, the execution policy is restricted because most users will not need PowerShell, and PowerShell is of course abused by malicious actors. So now we're just going to change that. So we're going to set execution policy to unrestricted, and then we're going to click or select A for yes to all. So now we're able to run PowerShell scripts. So I'm going to just clear the screen to show us so we have more room. So as you see, I'm at the desktop directory right now within my PowerShell, and the PowerShell script that I want to run, the UF that we created, is on the desktop. So I can just hit the /, start to type just the U, and I can do autocomplete to run the PowerShell script. And now we'll execute it. And basically what it's doing, it's first it stopped the Splunk forwarder, Then it set those configurations that we had, which was basically to collect the Windows event logs and sysmon, and then it restarts the Splunk forwarder. Now, to make sure that it did restart, we can run this command from step 7 in the walkthrough. And what it should do is list all the forwarders that are running. Now we have to log in once more. So remember, for Splunk, it's admin and the password 1. So now it's showing that we have an active Splunk forwarder, and it's forwarding to this IP address, which is our Splunk indexer and server over port 9997. So that's a good sign. Everything seems to be working. Before we do anything else, we want to copy and paste that PowerShell script in step 6C and just paste it in. And what this is doing is ensuring that the Splunk forwarder is running as system, which needs to run at an elevated privilege in order for it to forward the sysmon logs. Once that is complete, then it will go ahead and restart the Splunk forwarder. You may have to manually hit return on that restart command. Okay, so now to test if the logging is working, we're just going to copy and paste that PowerShell script in step 9. And you see it's open Notepad and it's open Calculator. So basically what that script did is it just started 2 processes, Notepad and Calculator. So now if we go back to Splunk that we are accessing from our host browser, and we can just use a very simple SPL. And what this SPL is doing is it's looking in the sysmon index for either process name, Notepad, or Calculator, and we're looking for the parent process of PowerShell, and then we're creating a table that will include these fields, and then we're sorting that by time. And right now we're looking in the last 15 minutes because we just ran that script. So if we run this, we see we get some hits right there. We see Calculator and Notepad were executed by PowerShell. So as we can see, the Windows log ingestion is working.